You know what never goes on hiatus? Our merch. Check it out in the link below. Hello ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between and beyond. So let's not mince words here. The Atlas military is pretty bad. You don't need to be a 5-star general to figure this out either. Some of the mistakes that they make are tactical in nature, but other areas are pretty common sense things. In this video, in no particular order, we'll be looking at the Atlas command structure, military doctrine, the air fleet and land forces, and the spirit of being constructive. I'll offer up some alternative ideas or other steps that they could have taken as we go. So here's the general situation. That's a pun. The whale's here, Atlas is here, and the army's here. Team RWBY is, well, somewhere over here. And where's our fleet? I think they're like out to lunch over there. More on that in a minute. What are the objectives? Ironwood wants to retrieve Penny and make the city ascend and get Atlas out of harm's way so that he can begin a war of attrition. Mantle can expect no help, and the situation in Remnant going forward would be uncertain? I've discussed the pros and the cons of this plan in a series of other videos available in the description below or as a card here. Salem's objective is to wait for an opportune moment to attack and retrieve the relic after a victory. If this sounds like a very passive plan, it is, but in this situation, Salem holds most of the cards and has a lot of options on the table. That said, she isn't the focus of this video, so we'll only mention her in passing as it relates. The thing that stuck out most to me was how much Ironwood tunneled on his plan A here. He does this while he's aware of the fact that the largest Grim Swarm anyone's ever seen is on his doorstep, accompanied by a shiny new type. He's even aware that the hard light shields will not hold forever, but he is absolutely fixated on getting Penny as his only option. With the general tunneling in, he's less available to oversee other tasks, namely a Grim invasion by air and land. Also, the fleet is seemingly idle and sidelining the crucial hours before Salem's forces touch down. Ground forces seem somewhat prepared, but civilian evacuations were left until the last possible moment. But to his credit, I guess at least he remembered it. Now, I'm a bit stunned that no one around Ironwood dared to ask the question, but sir, what if we don't find Penny in time? While it's clear that Ironwood's word is the final one, it can't hurt to at least respectfully offer up the idea. But okay, let's say that this is the best plan that they can come up with. Then yes, it's prudent to have Ironwood helming the operation. But was no other officer capable of carrying out the preparations for a worst case scenario? Ironwood wouldn't really need to be involved if he could just delegate it to some lower ranking officers. It costs Atlas almost nothing to put people on standby or to build fortifications. If they do convince Penny one way or another, those people can just stand down. If they don't convince Penny, then the defenses will come in more than useful. Having ground troops do nothing here was an incredible blunder. It seems to me that Atlas has his fixation on following orders to the letter and being almost completely unable to act without them. On doing nothing, one of the more striking things about this sequence is the position of the Atlas fleet. In previous episodes, we've seen the fleet holding a circular defensive ring above the cities, like so. So why would Ironwood suddenly change tact and put his fleet here? Well, I can imagine a couple of reasons. If he thinks the hard light shields can hold out long enough, then it makes some sense to preserve your air power for when you need it. Also, it looks like Atlas's air power has been reduced quite a bit, and there doesn't seem to be a shipyard anywhere nearby. By my count, there are 13 ships in total. Really, not a lot of ships in a show full of ships. So preserving those 13 is very important in this scenario. Now that said, I don't think it's a good idea to do that until you know for sure. It's a confident move on the part of Salem to move her Monster and Tempest this close, but getting some quantifiable data on the situation can only benefit you. Salem likely knows a lot about your ship's capabilities from Beacon, and you, James, know nothing of what the whale can do. Test its defensive and offensive capabilities. Send small raiding parties of mana fighters and strafe it up a bit. Even if you lose a few fighters, it's well worth it because you'll have quantifiable information to work with. The funny thing is that Ironwood seems somewhat aware that he needs to do this, but he only really tries to do it after the whale lands, which is a little too late. It's befuddling to me that Ironwood, who is so concerned about damage to Atlas, didn't want to at least try before it landed. And this is probably a moment that battleship commanders drool over. The enemy flagship has literally presented itself to you, with minimal escort, with its admiral on board, while your fleet is deployed. Why would you not even attempt to fire on it? Unless I'm misunderstanding, is that not what these airships were designed to do? A possible explanation would be Salem would know exactly how much armor she needs to build, so firing on it would be pointless. But that doesn't really track with how Ironwood attempts to attack it later on, when it did land. Now, what other role could the ships have? Well, close air support comes to mind. If nothing else, the crews on these ships really know how to aim their weapons. I'm talking about pinpoint precision here. Okay, so this video has been pretty negative on Atlas so far, so let's start with one of the positives. I'm incredibly amazed at how quickly Atlas was able to deploy its troops here. Like hundreds of them were ready and swarmed on the whale's landing site within minutes. The problem? They're deployed in a way that makes the rapid deployment almost meaningless. Now there are some really favorable things actually going for Atlas here in this battlefield. First of all, the battlefield is a literal battlefield. It's another pun. But aside from that, there won't be an excessive amount of civilian casualties to worry about for now. Had the whale landed in any of these residential districts, the civilian loss of life likely would be more significant. That said, it might be a bit easier to defend with the streets acting as funnels for large Grim, so it's kind of a give and take. As for the actual formation, it seems they're deploying in multiple mixed lines. Now, what's the problem with this? Well, it doesn't let the Atlas military use its units to the fullest potential. In the infantry formation, for instance, only the first and second ranks would be ready to fire. Everyone in the back here is just waiting for the person in front of them to get mowed down. The positive for this is that the line won't immediately fall apart if attacked in force, and you have ample reserves to deploy where needed. That said, this is just way too many units to be not fighting. And on attacking the line in force, a Goliath or two could very easily tear through this line like an ancient Carthaginian war elephant would. And I very much doubt that the rifles that these dudes are carrying are enough to kill this thing quickly. It'd be more effective if these units were deployed the length of the wall here. It's a little baffling as to why Atlas doesn't take advantage of this here. Hey, Future Eric here. So I noticed this frame here while I was editing, and this unfortunately undoes a lot of the points I had about using the wall. So in light of that, I'll just add this in here. For starters, the wall's really skinny. Like you can't walk more than single file up here. Also, this is a nausea violation. There's no railing here like the mantle one. So good luck if you slip and fall. This also means the wall would be easier to reach for the Grim below. So unfortunately, using the wall in any meaningful terms is out of the question since it was just built to be decorative? Also, there seems to be this World War I style trench here, which is extremely questionable. Aside from Napoleonic tactics mixing in with World War I stuff, it just doesn't look very cohesive. Like 3 different generals couldn't come to a consensus, so they just smashed their plans together. Now in practical terms though, when was this dug? I don't think it could have been when the whale landed because there wouldn't be enough time. It took a group of 450 World War I soldiers 6 hours to build 250 meters of trenches. If it were built prior to this, I don't really see the need for it because there aren't really any enemies around. Unless of course you're scared of Comrade Oscar's farmer revolt. But okay, let's say it was dug for the whale landing because Atlas tech. It was kind of a waste of manpower because, well, Grim just don't have that many projectiles that you need shielding from. Also, there's just not enough trench for all your soldiers. But even if you did have enough, the Grim Sabers would just leap over you. If you did have some time to do some digging, then a better trench would be in front of you to break the momentum of a charge, or at your sides to do the same thing and to protect your flanks. Also, you wouldn't really need to finish this thing with wooden boards because, well, you're not here for the long term. But then again, as we learned from Volume 7 and in Mantle, it seems that the Atlas military doesn't care too much about building or using proper fortifications in the first place. The Paladins are great mobile units capable of carrying out great charges and dishing out immense firepower. They're somewhere in between a super heavy infantry and armor unit. Now that said, their deployment on the front line here seems to be countering the heavier Grim like the Goliath. I think a more effective use of these things would be to deploy them along the length of the wall and use them as mobile reinforcements to shore up any breaches that happen. Or use them as stationary guns. Or there may be a case for them charging out and hitting the flanks with cycle charges. The density of this swarm here isn't so high that they lose momentum and get stuck, but they would also run the risk of Salem commanding her units to just mob the Paladins. If she can do that. I'm not sure if she has control from this far back. Is this the best plan in the world? Probably not. I'm just listing out the options here. Something else that I think is worth commenting on is the lack of field artillery or heavy firepower available to the Atlas infantry. There are even multiple high ground positions where they'd be relatively safe if covered sufficiently by air and infantry. Hell, the infantry doesn't even get so much as a mortar tube. They're stuck with small arms fire and whatever the Paladins are capable of dishing out. We know from Amity Arena that they do have stationary guns somewhere, but then again, this is a defunct mobile game we're talking about, so maybe I'll just take that with a grain of salt. Overall, the infantry fell short, like really short. Is it all their fault? Okay, now this is gonna be a bit of an add-on, but in these episodes, we see that there are dozens upon dozens of people operating these computers, monitoring the situation. And Bill. Now, what is the point of having an early warning system and people monitoring that if no one's going to act? Vine even whips out a scroll and acknowledges that they were preoccupied, but that's another problem. In a hypothetical, let's say Ironwood and the Aesop's weren't preoccupied, but dead or severely injured. Does Atlas High Command keep trying to reach them, or react? They weren't dead in this scenario, but in either case, commands can't be issued. It's just mind-boggling to me that the day you've been training and rehearsing for years, it happens, and you just ignore it. There are often times when soldiers need to use their own discretion, and this seems to be one of them. There are scenarios where communications or chain of command will be cut. You simply cannot fall back on waiting for orders in a critical moment like this. And there you have it, my 2 cents on the Atlas military's reaction to the crisis in Volume 8. If you liked this video, remember to like, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications, and check out our merch. If you agreed or disagreed, let me know what you thought in the comments down below. Also, what would your defense strategy be? Thanks for watching.